Hello and welcome to the ScatterVolt channel, and today I want to show you guys my $600 gaming PC build guide for 2022. This has been one of my favorite PC build guides to produce because it has also been one of the quickest, so it's really beginner friendly if you haven't built a gaming PC before. That being said, this is a $600 gaming PC in the year 2022, so given the graphics card shortage, don't expect any mind-blowing performance out of this budget gaming PC. Though that being said, this PC still can run some of the latest AAA titles at surprisingly good graphics at about 60 frames per second, like Forza Horizon 5, Resident Evil Village, and even Battlefield 2042. But if your main target with this computer was like free-to-play games, so Fortnite, Apex Legends, CSGO, Valorant, and a few others, expect well into the 144 FPS range and above. This computer will have no problems with those games. But the cool thing about this budget gaming PC is that it's a nice starter computer, because this actually doesn't use a dedicated graphics card to game. It uses integrated graphics in the main processor to do all the displaying and graphics computing, which is cool because whenever you do get your favorite graphics card of choice, whether that be an old NVIDIA card or an AMD card or even an Intel card, you could slap it right into this computer and it'll revert to the graphics card, and there you can have even more graphics performance with finally a dedicated graphics card. So this PC is ready for any graphics card you want to throw into it when you finally get the chance to. So in this build guide, I'll be discussing the parts that I use inside this computer, including alternatives if some of them go out of stock, and then how I built this PC step by step, then going into how to install Windows 10, the drivers, how to set up certain things in the BIOS for the best gaming performance possible, as well as a really quick overclocking section, which I really recommend you do with the processor and graphics we have in this PC. And then I'll go into the 1080p gaming benchmarks with over 15 different games, so you know exactly how well this computer performs, and then into the common Q&A section of this video, because I know there's going to be a lot of questions you guys are going to ask in the comment section, and all of those should be answered in that section in the video. And we'll close everything out with a giveaway. Yes, I will be giving away this computer, and all the deets for that can be found at the very end. So with all that said, if you like budget PC gaming content, do subscribe to the ScatterVolt channel, because we are finding ways to make content in this day and age of PC gaming. And if you want to help spread this video to more PC gamers, then give it a like and comment down below. And seriously, on my channel, any like and any comment actually goes a long ways if you've kind of considered where the channel's been the last year. So any support you give is much appreciated. All right, for the processor and graphics, we're using the AMD Ryzen 7 5700G. This is an APU, which is essentially a CPU and a GPU in a single chip, which is why we're able to display graphics in this computer without needing a dedicated graphics card. That being said, this is easily the best time to buy this processor, hands down. You can get it for $310 online in stock without any fees, or if you live near a micro center, and for that matter, if you don't know what a micro center is and you live in the United States, Google right now, micro center near me, and that'll literally save you hundreds on PC parts in the future. But at a micro center, this could cost as low as $250, which is nuts because it's an 8-core, 16-threaded, overclockable processor. I know Ryzen 7000 is on the horizon, but this is at such a low price right now in stock, and there isn't a guarantee you'll be able to get those new Ryzen APUs coming maybe this summer in stock at an acceptable price. So this is kind of a steal right now. Then if you notice, I am using an aftermarket CPU cooler in this build. I'm not using the stock cooler, and that's because I'm using the Thermaltake Tough Air 310 just as an optional aftermarket cooler in case you want to overclock. And you don't have to use this exact CPU cooler. Really, any tower aftermarket cooler will work in this build. You have plenty of height clearance, because if this can fit in this case, pretty much any budget air cooler you find will work with this case. But for that matter, you don't have to get this exact one. I want to emphasize that. But I really recommend overclocking this build because you will get much more performance out of it for not that much more money. So only about 20 to 30 bucks, which I got this for 35. Then for the motherboard, you can choose any B550 motherboard of your choice from any retailer, but the one that I chose for this build guide is the ASRock Phantom Gaming 4. This is for 90 bucks right now on Newegg, and it's just a great price, and it's been consistently in stock at 90 bucks, which is why I'm going with it. But any other day of the week, I could go with an MSI motherboard, a Gigabyte motherboard, or even an Asus motherboard, and it'll work just the same way as this one in this build. Then for the RAM, feel free to choose any 2x8 gigabyte kit of RAM, preferably at 3200 megahertz with a cast latency of 16, and you'll be good to go. That's all I'm gonna say. It doesn't have to be this exact kit of RAM that I used in this computer. It can be a Corsair kit, it can be a G-Skill kit, it can be a Crucial Memory kit, it could be a whatever kit. As long as it's DDR4 running at 3200 megahertz with a cast latency of 16 and it costs around 50 to 60 bucks, you're good. Then for our main storage, I'm using an Intel M.2 SSD, which the two that I like are the 660p and the 670p. So why specifically those two drives? Well, one, they're inexpensive right now. They cost as low as 50 bucks. Two, they feature DRAM. Yeah, always choose an SSD with DRAM. Let's just keep it at that. A lot of those cheap SSDs you find on Amazon and Newegg that look really appealing for the price probably don't have DRAM, which means they suck. So this one does, and it's M.2. So it's really easy to install on this computer, and it's faster than a regular SATA SSD. And 512 gigs is doable for a budget gaming PC like this in 2022. Like here it is, installing Fortnite at the speed of light. It's quick, for only 50 bucks. Next, for the power supply, I've chosen a 500 watt 80 plus bronze power supply. You don't have to choose this exact one that I used for this PC build guide, but for the time and date I was building this PC, I decided to go with the 500 BQ from EVGA. It's semi-modular, which is okay. It's not gonna affect the compatibility of this build, though the one important thing I'm gonna note is that how big of a power supply you get will influence what sort of graphics card you can put into this PC. A 500 watt power supply at most is going to support a Radeon RX 6600. All right, we're back. Or an RTX 3060. But if you go with a 650 watt or bigger power supply, you can fit up to an RTX 3070, RX 6700 XT, and the list goes on. Theoretically, if you threw in a 1000 watt power supply into this build, you could use an RTX 3090 or RX 6900 XT. If you wanted, if you really wanted to. But as long as it's 80 plus bronze or above, you're good. Then finishing out the parts list with the case, I have chosen the Matrix 40 by Deepcool, and really, this is just a nice case for an inexpensive price. And there are a lot of cheap PC cases out there that definitely make compromises and just suck, and this isn't one of them. It comes with 3 included RGB fans, a tempered glass side panel, PSU shroud, an overall nice looking design, and you can get it without any fans for about $47 on Newegg, I wanna say, and with 3 fans, it costs about $63, so pretty good in today's market. The only 2 things though I don't like about it is how confusing it is to put on and off this side panel. It takes you like 4 minutes your first try, and then you're like, oh, that's how you put it on. And the manual doesn't really tell you how you do it. Anyways, you'll guys figure it out once you put it together, but that, and you can't control the speed or the RGB on these fans. But if you didn't like that, you can get the non-RGB version of this case and put in your own RGB fans for less money if you really wanted to. So with all that, the base version of this PC without an aftermarket CPU cooler and without a Wi-Fi card is gonna cost you about $600 to build yourself. If you wanna throw in a high quality aftermarket cooler for about 30 to 35 bucks, so you can overclock the 5700G in this build for the most gaming performance possible, and a Wi-Fi / Bluetooth PCI card that you can put right below it, that's gonna run you about $660 to maybe $670, depending on the CPU cooler. So with all those parts out of the way, let's get into the tutorial for how to build this computer. The only tools you'll need to build this PC are a pair of scissors, a regular Phillips head screwdriver, and a Phillips head 1 screwdriver. Here is a motherboard manual. Keep this. See this CD drive? Don't need that. This is an I/O shield. You'll need this. These are SATA cables for like a hard drive or a physical SSD. You don't need these. Here are spare M.2 screws. I don't think you'll need these, but just keep them on hand. Unbox your CPU. Open up the latch here. Make sure to line up the triangle on the inside of the processor with the triangle on the socket. And place it in and close the latch. It should look like this once you put it in. Now let's install the stock CPU cooler, which by the way, already has thermal paste pre-applied, so you don't need to get your own. To install the CPU cooler, first take out these two black, I don't even know what to call them, just unscrew them. Retention brackets, that's what I meant to say. Then go ahead and place the CPU cooler along the 4 holes that you exposed from unscrewing the retention bracket. They should fall right into place. Then put some good pressure onto the CPU cooler, move that out of the way, and just go ahead and start screwing in the 4 screws. Don't screw in each one all the way though. I do a crisscross pattern, just kind of screw them in a quarter of the way so that they hit the thread, and then just rinse and repeat. I like screwing in each corner kind of like in a quarter before moving on to another one because it applies equal pressure onto the motherboard as you're screwing in the CPU cooler. Then take this cable that came off the CPU cooler and plug it right here where it says CPU fan. Next, you're going to want to install your RAM, and this is also super simple. All you got to do is press up the 2 tabs here on these 2 slots. If you want to know why, check the motherboard manual. I'll put that up on screen. That's the recommended layout for a dual channel set of RAM, and dual channel means 2 sticks, which is what we got here today. And it doesn't matter like the storage, whether it's 8, 16, or 32 with 2 sticks. It's always going to be in these 2 slots. And then let's say you get 4 sticks, put them in these other 2. This is the preferred memory layout for a dual channel set, which is what we got. Also, these sticks will only go in one way since these 2 sides here, divided by this little break right here, are different sizes. And you'll soon find that out if you try to put this in the wrong way. Once it's in, make sure to click with both hands. There you go. Get the other stick. There we go. Click it in all the way. Easy. Now to install our SSD, this is only going to go in one way, right here in the Hyper M.2 slot, right below the CPU. You want to have all the titles and names facing upward. And then to actually screw this down, you're going to want to take one of the screws that we found in one of these 2 little bags that came with the motherboard. This tiny little guy right here. And you're going to want to use your Phillips head 1 screwdriver. Put it on this little screw right here. Press down the SSD so it's flat. And then right here in this little hole, put the M.2 screw in here, screw it in, and there you go, it's in place. What I'm about to do next, you don't have to do. I'm just doing it for aesthetical reasons. This is a green M.2 SSD on a black motherboard, and it's gonna stand out like a sore thumb since there isn't a graphics card in this build. So I'm gonna put this little heatsink onto it, which will improve the thermals of it a little bit, but it'll just cover up the green stuff and it should look better. Okay, quick update. I went ahead and swapped out the stock cooler for this aftermarket one, that being the Thermaltake 310, and I recommend this because with the APU we're using for this build, I really recommend you overclock it so we get the most performance out of it for our gaming experience. And in order to do that, we need to upgrade the cooler because overclocking an 8-core processor with a stock AMD cooler is not going to go well. So I recommend this, and installing it was not hard. All I did is just follow the manual and it only took 5 minutes, so nothing too bad. Before we put the motherboard into the PC case, I want you guys to go ahead and find this. This is basically your front I/O cables and your case manual. You're gonna need these things as we move forward, but go ahead and open up the backside of your PC case just so you know where this is. So in this plastic baggie from where all those cables were, we are given a scrunched up case manual. This shows us where we need to put in what. If you didn't know where it went, you can follow this or follow my video tutorial. We're also given plenty of zip ties if we want to do any nice cable management here in the back. And here's a baggie full of all the screws we'd possibly need to build this computer. Before we put the motherboard into the PC case, grab your I/O shield, this shiny thing that came in the motherboard box, take it out. Installing this is very simple. You want the side with the prongs sticking out to be facing into the PC case. And the parts where like these little metal parts are sticking out on the outside of the I/O shield, you want that coming through on the outside. Takes a little bit of finagling, but you'll get it. There you go, just like that. So to install this, all you gotta do is just lower the motherboard down. Kind of aim it for where the I/O shield is. Press it up against it a little bit. Kind of roughly get it into place, and with your eyes, you're gonna wanna see if the standoffs line up with the holes on the motherboard. It doesn't have to be exactly in place. Once you get some screws, you can get those all the way in and that'll hold the motherboard in place, but just make sure it settles in. Now to install our motherboard into the PC case, these are the screws you're gonna wanna use. They come with the PC case, obviously. One thing you'll notice as I'm screwing these in is that I'm not fully putting them into the thread. I'm kind of going halfway, and that's because once I get all these screws in kind of halfway initially, then I'll go ahead and individually tighten each screw, but I'll do it in a star formation. That way I apply equal pressure on the motherboard. All right, now with all the screws in, I'm gonna go ahead and individually tighten each screw. So I'll go ahead and tighten up this one, then I'll go over here. Tighten up this one, go over here. Tighten up this one, just going corner to corner. There we go. When it is all said and done, your I/O shield should look like this from the back side of your PC case with the ports lined up just at the edge of the I/O shield. This right here is the actual power cable you use to hook up the PC to the wall socket, so keep this somewhere. And since the power supply we got for this build is semi-modular, we do have all these spare power cables here for like a graphics card, SSD, etc. And now we're also given these screws to actually put in the power supply into the PC case, but these also come with a case as well, so it's just more of the same screws. So before you put the power supply into the PC case, first thing I want you guys to do is to see where these different plugins are for the power supply. Since this is a semi-modular power supply, you already have the CPU power cable and motherboard power cable already in the power supply itself. And here, these are just optional, but we need some of these. So here where it says peripheral or periph, we need this to power up the RGB fans in our Deep Cool Matrix 40 case. So we'll go ahead and plug this in with the cable that says perf. And if you at all got a graphics card upgrade while using this computer, or you just have a graphics card in hand and you want to install it with this computer, here is the VGA power cable, which is what you're going to use for the graphics card. And you plug it right here where it says VGA, and really easy. But for this build, since there isn't a graphics card, we don't need this. The only thing you need is just this perf cable for the fans. Now go ahead and take your power supply, fan side facing down. You don't want to bring this in here. Line it up. Take your 4 screws, take them out, and yeah, screw it in. Like, nothing too hard here. So this build is going by quick, and let's go ahead and start hooking up everything on the back side of the computer, which is only going to be 3 different sections: the fans, the front I/O cables, and the power cables. First, let's go ahead and take care of the fans because it's really easy. They're only using these Molex power cables for the power and the RGB, and the front 2 are already daisy chained together. So let's go ahead and hook up the 3rd one on the rear. So now we have all 3 hooked up, and to power up and control all 3 of these fans, go ahead and grab your perf cable or your peripheral cable from the power supply. Make sure that's hooked into the perf slot and put this here on the bottom, and yep, there you go. All the fans are taken care of. Next, let's take care of the front I/O cables, which we'll be plugging in across these ports on the motherboard. Let's take care of the USB 3.0 cable, which is going to go right here. You can find its location in the motherboard manual where it says USB 3.0. There we go. Next, we're going to plug in our HD audio connector where it says HD audio on the connector. Seems pretty obvious, and it's going to go here on the bottom left. There you go. Should go in one way. Now let's take care of our USB 2.0 header where it says USB on the front header, since we already took care of our USB 3.0 header, that big thick black one. And now let's put this in. There we go. It can go in either of these USB 2.0 ports on the motherboard, and it'll only go in one way. Now let's take care of our HDD LED, reset switch, and power switch. Now if you look on the bottom side of the motherboard, you can actually see where the ports go where, or you can check your manual, but you just got to put it in the right order. It's not that hard to do, and I'm just going to go ahead and do this for you guys. This right here is what I ended up with. The power supply switch on top on the right side, with the reset switch right below it, and then the HDD LED switch, or just cable, right next to the reset switch cable. So that's what I plugged in based off of the motherboard manual, and if your PC doesn't turn on or the reset button doesn't work, that means you plugged in one of these connectors into the wrong pin. Now let's plug in our motherboard power connector. So here's where the clip is, and we're going to be putting this right here on the outside. And just like all the other connectors up until this point in the tutorial, it'll only go in one way. So don't worry, you won't plug this in the wrong direction. Now let's plug in our CPU power cable, which is the other cable that's directly hooked into the power supply. It's this one here with the 2 splits, the 2 4-pins split together. We're gonna want both of these together for actually plugging this in. And just like with the motherboard power connector, this will only go in one way. There's some clips on the top of this, and they'll be going on the top of the actual power connector on the motherboard. You'll be able to figure it out. You'll know like, oh, this way doesn't work, so I'll flip it. Okay, so we are just about ready to boot up the computer, but before we do that, I just want you to go through a little checklist to make sure you've got everything right. So we have the computer, we have the keyboard we're gonna use, we have the mouse we're gonna use, we have our monitor we're gonna use, and to hook everything up, of course, make sure you hook up your keyboard and mouse over USB on the back side of the computer. For the monitor, make sure you have your HDMI cable running from the back side of the monitor to the backside of the PC case where the motherboard is. Since there isn't a graphics card down here, you're actually gonna wanna use the integrated graphics since we got an APU in this build, obviously. And then for the power supply here, flick the switch from the circle to the line and make sure that this end of the power supply where the cable is hooked into a wall socket. Time to turn her on. Power button. Fans are spinning. Ooh, there we go. That took, you guys saw me walking around, right? There we go. Okay, this is good. So if you made it to this point in the build guide, then congrats. You've finished building the computer and now you're going to install Windows 10, do some changes in the BIOS to ensure maximum gaming performance, and install drivers. So before we do any of that, make sure you have your Windows 10 bootable media device on you. If you don't know how to make one of these, I have a video dedicated to that, linked in the description. Or you can just literally Google Windows 10 bootable media installation device, have an 8 GB or bigger flash drive on hand, which before you actually install that onto this, you have to do a format on it, which you just right click on the drive, format, it'll erase all the data on it so it can be ready to go. So then you go ahead and you run that program on here and you end up with this. Anyways, let's plug this into our computer, but first I wanna show you what happens when you don't plug this in, because I know you guys are gonna run into this. So now we are turning on the computer. I already did a test boot and I just wanted to make sure the computer worked and it got to the BIOS and it did. But here's our Windows 10 bootable media device. It's not plugged in yet. What's gonna happen? So if you come across this screen, that means you forgot to plug this in. So let's fix that. All right, so I plugged in that Windows 10 bootable media device into one of the USB 3.0 ports on the back of the computer. And now we just wait. There you go, there's the spinning circle. Next, install now. You don't have to have a product key on you. We can take care of that later. I'm gonna go ahead and opt for Windows 10 Home. I accept the license and terms, custom. There's our SSD. Hit next and boom, you just installed Windows 10. All right, it finished installing and now it should go right to the Windows 10 setup stuff, which is also really easy. So after about, I'd say 4 minutes or so, you should end up at a blue screen like this. Your PC may restart a few times. That's nothing to worry about. Let's go ahead and set up Windows 10. I'm in the United States, skip. We're not gonna worry about internet right now. I'm gonna say I'm user. Here's my password. There's my password again. My first pet was user. I was born in the city user. And the name of the city my parents met was also called user. So all this stuff I turn off just because it's possible processes that I'll be running in the background that I just don't need. Could possibly slow down my budget computer. I don't want that. Including this, I don't need Cortana. And boom, you just set up Windows 10 in like 60 seconds? Yeah, it's not that hard. Who said building computers was difficult? For real, comment down in the comments section who told you that, because they're wrong. All right, we've made it to the Windows 10 home screen, and now let's go ahead and install drivers, and then we'll revisit the BIOS to do some quick changes there. So as you can see, we don't have any internet right now, but don't worry. I got a USB card, I'm gonna plug that in. So if you have yours on hand, plug it in right now. Now's the time to use it, unless your motherboard already came with Wi-Fi. Okay, first let's go ahead and start installing our graphics card drivers for our integrated Vega graphics. So to do this, type in AMD drivers and support. Let's go ahead and select our processors with graphics, Ryzen 7 5000 series, and here's the 5700G, submit. Windows 10, because we're using Windows 10. We're gonna install the optional one because it came out yesterday. All right. Finish up. Quick setup, gaming, continue. Now let's install our chipset drivers and other motherboard drivers. So let's type in B550 ASRock Phantom Gaming 4. You need to go to our Motherboard website page, go to support, download. So this is what we need. We need our chipset drivers. We aren't using an Ethernet cable, so we don't need our LAN drivers. We aren't doing RAID, so we don't need RAID drivers. We don't need that, we don't need that. We only need this, our chipset drivers. I will say, if you have drivers for your PCIe Wi-Fi card or USB Wi-Fi card, then go ahead and install those now as well. Might as well. Install. Now I'm going to restart the computer, and whenever it finishes, I'm going to go ahead and spam the delete key. That way we can enter the BIOS, and we can do those necessary changes to the BIOS to make our PC faster for gaming and do some overclocking. When the screen goes dark, get ready. You're going to want to spam the delete key. Okay, spamming it. There you go. We're in. Here is the BIOS. The first thing we're going to do is enable XMP on our RAM. So we're going to go here to load XMP setting. Profile number 1, that is taken care of. Now let's go ahead and disable CSM. So we're going to want to turn this off in order to enable some other things in the BIOS. So let's go ahead and disable that. Now let's go to PCI configuration. Let's enable above 4G decoding. Resize bar support, turn that on. We got that taken care of. Now let's go ahead and set our UMA frame buffer size. So go to advanced, AMD CBS, NBIO, GFX configuration, iGPU configuration, UMA specified. I guess game optimized will work too. That sounds like an option too, but this is what I know. And I'll set this to 4 gigabytes. So 4 gigabytes of our DDR4 system memory will be treated as video memory whenever we boot up a game, which is really dope. Don't go above 4 though, because we only have 16 gigabytes of RAM, so we still need some left for the system. And now let's do some overclocking. But before we touch that, go to advanced, go to AMD overclocking, accept, manual, or no, precision boost overdrive. We're gonna wanna turn this off. We don't want it to possibly interfere with our overclocks. Let's go to OC tweaker. So for the GFX clock frequency, I think 2400 is possible, and we'll set this to a 1.35 volt, or sorry, 1.3 volt. Then for our CPU frequency, we'll go to manual. We'll set this to 4500 megahertz or 4.5 gigahertz, and this will be across all cores, because right now it's only turbo boosting up to 4.6 gigahertz on one core. So this will net us more performance, and I'll also keep this at 1.3 volts. So with all of that said, hit exit, save changes and exit, hit yes, and let's wait. Oh my God. Yo, that actually worked. Let's go. All right, congrats, you made it a long ways. And let's close out the video with some chill questions and answers that I know you guys are gonna ask in the comment section. So if you ask any Google search question, I'm just gonna link you to this point in the video because I'm most likely gonna answer your question. Number one, what sort of graphics cards can I put into this computer? Like I said at the start of the video, you could put in any graphics card you want into this computer as long as you have enough wattage to support it with your power supply. The only graphics card in particular I would dislike putting in the system right now would have to be the Radeon RX 6500 XT, because that is best used with PCI Gen 4.0, and the 5700G in this build can only support PCI Gen 3.0, which is a real shame. Not for the processor, but for the graphics card that AMD came up with. So that's the only graphics card I would dislike putting in the system right now, just because it'll perform at the same level as a 3-year-old GTX 1650, and that wouldn't be cool. Two, how would I activate Windows 10 on this computer and get rid of that watermark? Well, I'm glad you asked. So if you want to activate Windows 10 in this computer for cheap, I recommend you head over to VIP SCD Keys, where you can grab yourself an inexpensive Windows 10 home key, and activating it is really simple on this computer. Just go ahead and purchase the key off their website with your preferred method of payment, and then you'll receive the key in a short amount of time. And then in this computer, you go ahead into the Windows search bar and type in activation settings, and there should say Windows 10 not activated. There should be a link that says change product key. You go ahead and click that, enter in the key that VIP SCD key gave you, hit activate, wait about a minute or so, and then it'll say that your Windows 10 PC is activated. So for those of you who choose to overclock the 5700G in this computer, which again, like I've said many times in this video, I really recommend you do, well, keeping it overclocked for a long period of time possibly reduce its lifespan or just be bad overall for the processor in the long run. Not with the settings that I used. As long as you stay below 1.3 volts on the iGPU and the CPU portions of the 5700G, you're fine. If you go to even 1.35 volts, you're still kind of okay. But if you go 1.4 volts and above, that is where there's a bit of concern when it comes to the longevity of your CPU, because that's just still a lot of wattage given the processor. So as long as you stay 1.3 volts or below with your overclocks, you can leave it on for forever. Can this PC stream? I wouldn't recommend it, I'll tell you that. I know I'm gonna be asked that so many times in the comment section, and I'm just gonna go ahead and link this part. I wouldn't try streaming. If you get a dedicated graphics card at some point, yeah, you can look into it, because after all, you're given an 8-core 16-threaded processor, and at that point, you can use X264 CPU-based encoding like an OBS or Streamlabs, and do the encoding on your CPU while the gaming is done on your GPU, or if you get an NVIDIA GPU, you could just use that outright as your encoding solution with hardware-accelerated encoding. So you have different options. Just as an integrated solution for graphics right now, I wouldn't try it in this base form of the PC. Can this PC run virtual reality? I'm not technically going to answer this question because you should go ahead and look at the required settings for VR, for the Oculus Rift, or the HTC whatever, or Valve Index, and see if the Vega 7 or Vega 8 graphics are listed as a requirement. If they aren't, then that should be a really big cue for if this PC is compatible with VR. Or the fact that it has a single HDMI port and you kind of need like more ports for VR. Use your brain. What sort of cases will work with this computer? Any micro ATX case you want. You could even use ATX cases. You'll just have to do some stuff with the standoffs first, because most likely it'll be pre-given to you in the ATX layout, and you just have to remove a few standoffs to put it in the micro ATX configuration, and you'll have some awkward dead space between the bottom of the motherboard and the bottom of the inside of the PC case. But literally any PC case in the world that is ATX or micro ATX will work with this PC. Do I need to buy any extra cables for this PC? No. Otherwise, I would have linked them in the description. Don't worry, I got you guys covered. What Ryzen processors can I use in this gaming PC? You can use any that have a 5 in front of it. There you go. You could use the 5600G, you could use the 5950X, you could use the 5900X. I guess the last question is, what's the ideal monitor to pair up this gaming PC with? If it's a 1080p, 144 hertz, FreeSync monitor, you're good. This is a budget gaming PC. You can get a super overkill monitor to pair it up with it. Of course, you won't be able to use the full capabilities of it, but really any monitor you pair up with this computer is going to be fine as long as it has an HDMI port. So pretty much anything on the market is going to be fine with this computer. So that's sort of it for the Q&A section, and now you've made it to the giveaway section of this video. So how I'm going to be picking the giveaway winner is I'll be choosing a random comment using this random comment selector online. I'll paste the comments from this video in there. It'll choose a random winner, and all you have to do is, of course, comment, like this video, and make sure you're subscribed to the ScatterVolt channel. And I'll be contacting the winner over your contact information in the About section of your YouTube channel to verify with you, make sure you've done the steps, and of course, kind of vet you and see if you deserve this computer. Because if you already have one, I want to give this computer to somebody who doesn't have one, you know? And for that matter, this is an international giveaway. I will spend no more than $500 though, shipping this overseas. If you live in some remote island in the Pacific Ocean, probably not, but if you live in a big country overseas, you can have a fair shot at getting this as if you were in the United States. So that is it for this $600 gaming PC build guide and pretty much everything you want to know about it. And if you've made it to this point in the video, thank you. Like, any bit helps. Any like, any subscribe, any comment, and even just watching all the way through my videos, any little bit helps. So seriously, thank you. And if you haven't yet, consider subscribing if you made it to this point in the video, because I think you like my videos. So with all that said, thank you so much for watching, and this is the ScatterVolt channel, signing out.